welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field.
Hello and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am so excited to have with me today Jenny McMichael. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Selena. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining me today.
Of course.
So, Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about yourself today?
Of course. So my name is Jenny McMichael. I am our autism specialist for Spotsylvania County Public Schools. I am the specialist assigned to our public separate program for students with autism. I have been a classroom teacher for students with autism for about 11 years and then recently moved into this position this year and am enjoying it greatly.
Well, congrats on the new position.
Thank you.
So today we're talking about kind of an interesting topic. We're really talking about ABA and how there are unfortunately, some misconceptions around our field and what we do, especially in the school system sometimes. And so I want to start out by asking you, why should we be even talking about misconceptions around behavior analysis in public schools?
Absolutely. And so my backstory a little bit about how I got into ABA and even realized that there were misconceptions is I started as a brand new autism teacher 11 years ago when I was fresh out of grad school. I had my one ABA class when I got my master's in special education, and otherwise my experience had been reading intervention in a Title I school. And so I came in with my behavior clip chart and my chairs were in a big circle. And I was blessed enough to have a wonderful mentorship with our autism specialist who told me that's not going to work and really started me. And she's a BCBA page and really started me on ABA. Talked to me about environmental modifications, about visual supports, about teaching our students the way that they'll learn. In addition to that, early on, maybe my second or third year, Jim Partington served as a consultant for one of our students. And so we were lucky enough that he came to our division, he came into my classroom. And honestly, at that time, I didn't know how nervous I should be. I was like, oh, Jim, hi. Luckily, because I would have been like, oh no. Well, yeah, he was in my classroom. He gave me lots of feedback. I was able to go to his clinic out in California and really see what I was like, well, that's magic. And then I learned that that's called ABA. So it clicked. And so why would we do anything else? Like, this is how my kids learn. This is how they're successful. This is how, honestly, they're happy. And so why would I do anything else? So then I was like, I have to know more. So I started my coursework in behavior analysis. And I was all in, like I was all ABA all the time. And then I was on social media and learned that there's people that don't like ABA.
They exist. They definitely do.
They do. That like hate ABA. And I was like, what? And so, I mean, as I've been practicing for more years and interact with more people around this, and ABA has become more prominent in the community at large, there are a lot of misconceptions and people that have had negative experiences. There are teachers that we've worked to embed behavior analytic techniques in their classroom, even for students without disabilities. And there's been that pushback with some of those misconceptions of I'm not using bribery or that only works for autism. And so, yeah, I think that it's something that we have to hit on a case-by-case basis as we're supporting teachers. And I mean, that's my role, is supporting teachers, but also supporting families. And then also we should put forth a good representation of ourselves in the community. It is what works. It is what's good for our kiddos. And because that's what I've lived, and I want them to have access to those quality services because I know it's what they need. And if there's misconceptions surrounding that, I don't want someone to be reluctant to access that service.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think in school systems, one of the things that we struggle with is there's a lot of voices at the table. And that can be a really great thing. But it can also, because we don't all speak the same language, sometimes can breed some confusion, I think. At the end of the day, if you're a good professional, you want what's best for your client. And so, as a behavior analyst, we want what's best for our clients, and in schools, that's our students. But if we have people around the table that don't understand what we do, I can absolutely understand hesitancy to jump 2 feet in and say, okay, let's go ahead and do this. So let's get into what some of these really common misconceptions might be. What are some of the ones that you deal with the most frequently?
Sure. And so, especially in the school setting, working with gen ed teachers or other teachers that have students with disabilities, even if they might not be autism, is that ABA is purely discrete trials, and that ABA only creates those robotic responses, and that it turns our students into robots. So why would I want that for my student? And so I think it starts with recognizing that, yes, of course, discrete trial is a part of ABA. Not all ABA is discrete trial. And yes, we do begin to teach many skills with rote memorization. But also when we think about how we learned math facts, or I was a music major in college, and so music scales, or sight words, like it's that rote, you sit there, you drill your scale over and over. That's how lots of things are initially learned. And then you can generalize that into understanding how to use scales when you're improvising music, or how to understand the key in music, or how you apply those math facts that you've learned through memorization. And so recognizing like, yep, that is a part of ABA. It's not all of ABA.
Yeah, I am with you on this one. I dealt with this a lot when I was in the schools too, is that ABA means discrete trial training, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. There were some parents I worked with that's what they wanted for their kid all day long, was for them to have discrete trial training. And then when I would come in and say, well, that's not what we actually think we should be doing all day long, that could cause some misconceptions as well. And so I had to explain that, we have reinforcement and shaping and chaining and modeling and prompting and tasking. And I could go on. I know I'm preaching to the choir here of all the things that are part of our field. But, discrete trial training has its place. It's certainly important for some things, but it is such a small part of our field and of our science, that I think helping people have a better understanding that we don't have a technique that we engage in. We are a field of science that uses behavior analytic principles, and how we apply those varies depending on the student, depending on the environment, depending on, a lot of factors.
Absolutely. And then even like planning for that, different environments and students, that we have, 7 dimensions, like get a cab. And literally one of the 7 dimensions is generalization, that it's not, I can use this sitting at a table when you say it a specific way with these specific supports, that we are teaching our students to generalize these skills for critical life skills. And any quality program is going to plan for that generalization and work on teaching that skill across people and settings and stimuli. And also looking at, the generality, looking at effectiveness, that it's applied, that we're going to select those socially significant behaviors. Really combats that notion of like, we're just creating these robots with these drilled responses.
Right. Which I think kind of brings us to another misconception that comes up sometimes. This idea that what we do is unnatural, or it doesn't simulate the real world, so to speak. What are your thoughts about that? Do you deal with that?
Absolutely. And it's so not even ever like, we have to get these kids ready for the real world. I'm like, wait, what world are we in right now?
Right.
But understanding that ABA is not some contrived, only happens in the clinic, only happens in the certain classroom, only happens for 60 minutes a day, that antecedents and consequences are all around us. And us as adults that are not receiving ABA services experience reinforcement and punishment all the time.
Oh, absolutely. That's why you stop at a stop sign, right? You don't want to get that ticket for sure.
Right. So these are things that are happening. And as providers, we apply the science of ABA and understanding how these things work and how behavior changes as a result of them to increase or decrease behaviors in an individualized and systematic manner. We're just intentional about it. It's happening.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the intentional part, because I think there's times where, you know, and again, all of this depends on the client, depends on the setting, depends on the behavior. There's so many factors that we consider. But this idea that we may have to initially teach in a little bit of a contrived setting, but that is never the intent of where we would stop. And when we can teach in the natural setting, that's what we really should be doing. But in schools, the natural setting for our children is school. That is what their peers are experiencing. And so that's what we need to be focusing on, is helping them to be effective and successful in the school setting.
Yeah, and I see, especially in school, some of the unnatural, it's not the real world, is when we talk about reinforcement. Is that the second grade teacher says, well, I'm not going to give them a Skittle or a car or a note each time, because that's not the real world, and they should do it because I said so.
Or because they want to, which is always my favorite, which is so frustrating. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I will interject one thing that frustrates me so much about that scenario is, first of all, but we're talking about a second grader, right? And, you know, a second grader is what, 7, 8 years old? You know, maybe they just don't want to. Maybe that's just not where they are. Let's be honest, as an adult, there are things I don't want to do either, but I'm an adult, so I do them. And I put a smile on my face, hopefully, but that doesn't mean that I wanted to do this particular activity. And I'm able to control some of my own contingencies. So we find our own reinforcers as adults. Why would we expect that children do anything differently? Especially when we can't control all of their contingencies like adults may do. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. And even our teachers are not volunteering to come in here because they just want to. And not that they wouldn't, because I've been blessed to work with wonderful teachers that, honestly, if there was no paycheck, they probably would come in and teach their kids anyways. But
well, I don't know about that, but they deserve their paycheck for sure.
But we're not here just because we want to, or just because we were told to. We're experiencing reinforcement, not through only a paycheck, but through the social opportunities that we have at work, through praise, through positive feedback on evaluations.
Even
we're not just doing
our students might be is reinforcing for many of us in the field.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. I think we have to be really careful when people start saying, well, this isn't the real world. Well, first of all, you're right. It's school, which is not the same as the real world sometimes. And second of all, like, we're also not dealing with fully developed adults here. We're dealing with, even high schoolers are not fully developed adults. They are high school students who are teenagers, who sometimes are irrational, sometimes are impulsive, sometimes they don't make the best decisions. Their thought processes are different, all of those kinds of things. And so,
yeah.
and I think our part is, why wouldn't we, if I can give you just this little reinforcer and then my day is all so much better and your day is so much better, why wouldn't we do that?
And why can't we meet you where you are? Like, right. When it gets to the point, unfortunately, that I'm supporting a teacher with this, is because what's happening isn't working.
Right. Exactly.
And so we have to change something. So,
yeah, that's a really important point that I hit a lot when I work in the schools is, well, you know, he or she isn't doing what they're supposed to do and they should just want to do it. Well, but they're not. So this is where we are. And, you know, no matter who our client is, even if we're working with fully grown adults, we coulda, shoulda, woulda all day long, but we're not. And this is where we are right now. So how do we move from where we are? Or I wouldn't be here as a behavior analyst.
Right. And our obligation also as behavior analysts is that whenever we introduce, you know, reinforcers, any of those contrived reinforcers, that we have specific procedures for fading those before you even start using them. And that we are intentional, that we're always going to pair those contrived reinforcers. If, you know, we start with a Skittle and people are like, I'm not going to cut up my Skittle in fourths and give them candy for this, that we always have a plan to pair that with naturally occurring reinforcement, because we don't want a kid to need cars and paper and Skittles for the rest of their life. Absolutely. That's not the real world. I mean, we want them to access naturally occurring reinforcement and that to be effective. And that's something that we're going to teach.
Exactly. So give me another one, Jenny. What's another misconception?
I think that there's the my child did ABA and yada, yada, yada. Or I had a student once and they did ABA and they did XYZ, and I don't agree with that. And what I've seen that stem from is, unfortunately, providers that claim to be an autism expert, an ABA specialist, some sort of credential that includes the words behavior in it, but is not a certified or licensed behavior analyst.
Yeah, I see this one too. And I unfortunately, in my experience, I see this a lot around ASD. Like, I'm an autism expert. I'm not a behavior analyst. I'm not a, I don't have any formal training, but I'm an autism expert, or a self-proclaimed autism expert. I'll put out there. I went to a meeting one time, and I was new to the school district, and I was a BCBA at the time, and I had worked with children with autism for a number of years, and all these things. And so I go into this meeting, and one of the people in the meeting says, "Well, what makes you an expert?" And so I said, "Well, I think we're always learning and all of that." But I kind of went through my credentials, so to speak. And the person informed me that they had been to a week-long training on autism. And so that certainly they knew more than everybody else in the room. And I don't mean to make fun of this, because I certainly think that those things can be helpful and informative, and you should try to educate yourself. But because the word expert isn't an observable, measurable, kind of operationally defined term, I think we have to be really conscientious when people say I'm an expert in, because we have such varying degrees of understanding of what that means.
I agree. I think one of the other barriers when I have families that have said, my child did ABA and it was a negative experience, and it's saddening, is that they did have a negative experience. And I see some of it as there's been some parent shaming. And the ABA teacher, practitioner said we had to do 40 hours, and I had speech and OT and I couldn't, and they made me feel so little for not doing that. Or they told me that I had to follow a toileting protocol where we went every 10 minutes, and I couldn't do that when we were shopping, and really, I couldn't follow it. And they said if I couldn't follow it, then it was my fault. Where parents have just
really unfortunate. And I will tell you my own experience. There has nothing been so humbling as having children myself and going, "Oh, it is really hard to potty train your own kid." And I potty trained many, many children in my career, but holy cow, my own kid was a different story. Or, getting them to sleep at night, or getting them to eat a regular schedule. And, when it is your own child, it's a lot different.
Yeah.
And I don't know that all the professionals in our field always have that experience and understand that.
Yeah. And I think one of our obligations also is there is a parent training component, and this is a team, that it's not your child comes and gets ABA in this clinic, in this classroom for 60 minutes once a day for 40 hours a week, that we're a team, we're going to have consistency, and we're going to provide training to the people around this student and those wraparound services. But also, we need the consent of the student and the family and their buy-in for any intervention we have.
Well, because let's be honest, the best intervention is the one that works. And that sounds so simple and ridiculous, but I've been there. I have designed beautiful intervention plans and present them to the team, and they laugh or smile or whatever, because they know that it can't be implemented the way that I dreamed it should be. And I've learned over the course of my career that contextual fit is really, really important, and making sure that people can really implement what you actually are suggesting.
And I agree, finding that right fit for the student, their situation, what their placement is in school, and what the goals of the student and the family are, is incredibly important.
So are there any, I feel like there's kind of one we haven't touched on, but I'll see what you think. Is there one more that you have in mind?
There is, and it's a hard one, and it makes me uncomfortable, and I hope it makes us all uncomfortable. And it's interesting, we're recording, I don't know when these will come out, but we're recording this in April. And so it's autism awareness, autism acceptance, all of that month. So, on my social media, there's lots of talk about it. And it's that idea that ABA is abusive, that ABA creates PTSD, that it's about forcing autistic individuals to be quote unquote normal, and not embracing who they are. And it sits heavy with me, and it's kind of heartbreaking to hear that, because that's our field.
Right.
And we would never want that.
Right. I'm with you. And it's funny because I'm kind of like you. I don't know that I was exposed to some of this when I was becoming a BCBA, but since I have become a BCBA, this comes up periodically. And let me preface this by saying I've worked with families that love behavior analysis. They believe in it. It is what has helped them. It has helped their child. I've worked with adults who don't have ASD, who it has. I mean, our field is so broad. I mean, right? We can. I don't do this, but there are behavior analysts who help with everything from gambling addiction to smoking cessation to weight loss to geriatrics. I mean, I could go on and on.
I mean, the sports medicine part, like these athletes that use it, and I don't do that either.
Right. So, I mean, we have such a far reach and a potential far reach, but when it comes to individuals with ASD, we don't have always the best history, which I think stems from some bad apples, perchance. I also think there's misrepresentation. I think sometimes people express themselves as behavior analysts, or I'm a behavior specialist. And then there's a conflation with, well, if you're a behavior specialist and behavior analyst must be the same thing, and they're not at all. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I agree this is a huge issue, because you're right, it's our field, and I wouldn't be a behavior analyst if I didn't believe in behavior analysis. But I believe in behavior analysis because I've seen great outcomes happen for individuals.
It is. And I mean, of all the great things, I think it's us as like when I'm evaluated by people, that the one negative, like we have 100 families that say that this was wonderful and beneficial and all the great things. But the one negative is the one that I think about when I go to bed. And the potential that one family or one kid is saying that this was unethical or abusive, that's the one that I'm going to be stuck on. And I think we do have to recognize that there are ABA providers that have crossed the line. I think that happens in every profession. There's doctors, there's pastors and priests and teachers, and really anyone in a position of power over other people can be abusive or can create traumatic events. And I think that it needs to be called that that's abuse and that's unethical. It needs to be reported to the board, and it needs to be named as that. Like, we need to put that label on it, that that's what this is.
Well, and you bring up a really important facet here, is that's why we have a certification board. That's why many states have licensure, including Virginia, because as a field, we have said we don't tolerate bad practice. We want excellent professionals in our field doing excellent work. And so there are, and I know people that are behavior analysts listening to this understand we have an ethics code, and that, we have a board that can implement sanctions against us. Your licensure board, if you're in a state that has licensure like Virginia, can implement sanctions against you. I think where this gets tricky is if you're not certified and you're not licensed, the board and the licensure board don't have a lot of ability to do much about it. But I agree with you. I think every profession has potentially a bad apple or two. And unfortunately, as a field, it's our responsibility to deal with that. But I hope and continue to work on, I mean, this is something that I'm passionate about, is that we are promoting our field in a positive way and showcasing the good work that good professionals are doing.
Absolutely. And so I think that, I mean, when we hear this, as hard as it is to talk about that, we refer back to our ethical code, and we refer others back to what our ethical code is. And to talk about what our purpose is and what we actually do, which is teaching critical life skills and removing barriers to learning. That we're not forcing someone to be normal or telling someone that, you can't flap your hands or you have to look at my eyes for 30 seconds, that we're working as part of a team with the consent from the client, be it, and, that's a discussion in and of itself, is who is the client? It's our student, it's our family, it's the school, but it's the whole team that we need to identify what those critical life skills are and how to increase those and what those barriers to learning are and how we get past those.
And supporting clients to understand that they're in the driver's seat, right? I mean, if you're 4, you're 4, but you still get preferences, you still have say so. Your family certainly does. If you're an adult, you definitely get to be in the driver's seat of, if you don't want to learn a certain skill, you may not have to learn that. I mean, I don't really want to learn how to go run a 26-mile marathon. It's just not something I want to do. And I'm okay with that. And I'd be really angry if somebody forced me to do that. But I think, one of the things I think about a lot, because I've heard this as well. In my mind, we're not trying to strip people of who they are. We're really trying to support people to be the best person they want to be. And so that's why we focus on things like making sure that you can dress yourself, making sure that you can use the bathroom by yourself, making sure, and I recognize these are basic skills, but these are huge quality of life skills.
And I mean, to give people dignity.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't use the bathroom by yourself when you're an adult, that's a very intrusive situation if someone has to help you with that. But even once you master those early skills, like, school is really hard for some people. And so let's help it not be so hard for people. And whether it's hard academically or socially or emotionally, I think that behavior analysis has something to contribute to any and all of those areas, depending on what students need as they get older.
It does. And I think we have come a long ways as a field in obtaining our client input and informed consent. When I am using new protocols like the enhanced choice model from Greg Hanley, that you have a choice whether you participate in this or not. And if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah.
And the research says that our learners choose to participate, that they would rather come participate in the intervention and learn skills than not. And I think that speaks for itself.
Well, and again, if you don't want to, then you don't want to. I mean, even a 4-year-old, if they really, really don't want to participate, they're not going to, one way or the other. So let's teach them a better way to say, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And, teach them to say no and no, thank you. I don't want to. Those are important life skills too. So, Jenny, I think we could talk about this forever. I think there's a lot going on here, but I think these are really good. I think these are some really big ones that come up a lot. But so I guess the question is, so where do we go from here? Like, what are some things that we can do to help continue to promote our field in the way that, we want our field to be seen? And I guess particularly as it comes to behavior analysis in schools.
Absolutely. And I think that, is our mission field. Is we are behavior analysts. We are representing the field in its entirety. When we talk about a bad apple, like also a good apple, I mean, I started with one person who knew ABA and coached me through it, and it clicked. So I think that us as individuals can make big changes. So having those positive interactions with, in schools, our school staff, with families, with our learners, promoting and engaging in ethical behavior. But really, it's that where it clicked, that light bulb moment for me, that's what turned me on to ABA and made me want to become a BCBA. And I have been able to reach, countless families because someone that knew what they were doing coached me, and it works. When it's done right, it works. And I trusted them and had that fidelity of implementation. And that is a reinforcer of itself. My students started learning, my students were happy, my classroom was a better place.
Well, and I think one of the easiest, I say easiest cautiously, but the easiest and best things we can do, to your point, is be a good ethical practitioner. right? I mean, we talked about all the places behavior analysis touches, and we both said, I mean, I don't do this, right? And I'm not going to suddenly become somebody who specializes in those. If I wanted to switch my focus, there's ways to do that, but I don't suddenly say, oh yeah, I can help you, lose weight. I can help you throw a football better. No, I can't. And I'm not going to pretend that I can. Do I understand the science behind it? Yes. Am I an expert or am I competent in doing that? No. And so, staying with my scope of competency is really important. Seeking out good other strong professionals who know what they're doing so that you can continue to learn and grow, I think is a big part of it. And the other really big thing is, I think, just being really honest, right? Like, we don't make guarantees. We don't make promises that we can't follow through on. I'm not going to cure your child. I'm going to help you to help your child. I'm going to help you, teacher, to help your students so that they can be as successful as they can be.
And I think talking about, finding the people that have those fields of expertise, but also us, and I see it in school, and I'm trying to think about if it would be as prevalent outside of the school setting, but playing nicely with others.
Absolutely.
Coming to meetings with speech pathologists and occupational therapists and not saying, I know verbal behavior, that's me. Playing nicely and recognizing the expertise of others. And I think that, our behavior analyst network in Virginia has done a good job of working with other professionals and saying, this is somewhere we need to grow. How do we collaborate effectively together?
Yeah. I think you make really, really good points and some good takeaways today. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that just starting a conversation about what those preconceived notions are and about how we can better ourselves as professionals to better the field is what we need to be doing and where we need to be going.
I agree. I think continuing to have the conversation so that we can continue to become the best we can be is what we need to be doing. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. For our listeners, I hope that you enjoyed today, and I will hopefully have you join us again on our next episode. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.